Welcome to the session with the title Compliance, the New Orange in Enterprise Client Management. Uh, just had a talk with my colleague like 3 minutes ago, and he said it's funny that this feature here is one of the most underutilized features in Configuration Manager, and it is, and that's this entire session here is just to give you some inspiration to what you can actually do with the feature, because there is a lot you can do. You can cheat, that's good. You can avoid all the normal service level agreements and ask for permissions and stuff like that. That's really good, so we don't have to go through all of that. The agenda for this one here is to kind of position compliance management and say, why is this actually unique compared to some of the other features that we have? And I'm not saying that working with task sequences and apps and stuff like that is not cool, because it's really cool, but this is extremely unique compared to some of the other stuff. Some of the purposes, so we'll dig into some use cases. Most of the use cases are use cases that I have been using at customers, and some of them are just invented for today because I thought it would be funny. I'm pretty sure they will work in production though, but just for this demo purpose here. Then we're going to take a look at what happens on the client side, and also how we can use this for reporting purposes instead of using some of the traditional reports that we have in here. I do like questions, so if you have any, just interrupt me. I know, especially in the afternoon, it can be some long sessions, and as I recall it, you have one more session after this one here. So, unique positioning. How is compliance management like a GPO? It's like a GPO in the way that we can go in and configure more or less the exactly same settings as you can do in a GPO. How it's not like a GPO is that it's so much easier for us to go in and create a like a pilot deployment, because all we need to do is create a collection, add a couple of users to that collection or a couple of devices, and then go ahead and create and deploy the baseline. If you have to do the same with a GPO, first of all, you need access to Active Directory. It's not that super easy for everybody to go into a strange and foreign Active Directory that is in no way documented. So if you remove something or you add something, then you see something over here tumbling down. So that's how it's not like a GPO. An application deployment. We can deploy applications using ACI. We do not have any content, so that's how it's not like a normal app deployment. But if we can get to the application, to the source files using a script, then we can easily deploy the apps using a CI in here. Primary source for management. This is what I mean by that is this is what management wants. They want to have a dashboard, not red colors. They want to have all green. And a baseline can ask all the questions that you want to ask in your organization, like, how am I doing on my BitLocker protection? Well, in this environment, I'm not doing that good. I'm only 24% compliant. I have a lot of errors, and then I have some that are definitely non-compliant. Stuff like, how am I doing on my reboot pending? It was just patched Tuesday a couple of days ago, so why are we not compliant? Well, there might be a very good reason why we're not compliant. More than 50% of all the devices that we have are in a reboot pending mode. So this is what I mean when I say we need to position compliance also as the primary source for management, and that is like giving the right information to the guys who are making all the tough decisions that we have to work out on later. And then basically just for this one here, think out of the box. I've seen some extremely cool examples of stuff that I didn't even know or realize that a CI could do. One of them being distribute certificates. So when you have a self-signed certificate that some of you are using in your SCOP solutions when you're deploying your CU updates and so on, you know, every machine that takes part in that process needs to have the self-signed certificate in the trusted root and the trusted publisher store. How do we normally do that? Well, we can create a GPO, but then again, if you work in an enterprise environment and you have to create a GPO, it can take a while. Trust me. It can easily take 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks from you make the request until you actually can go in and make that change in production. And that's what I mean by a CI. Nobody knows what we're doing in Config Manager. I mean, we won't tell anybody. So why not just go in, create a collection, test that it works, and there you go. And it's the same result. So thinking out of the box, that's really the key in here. And then figuring out when a CI is actually better than other methods. I mean, we do not use CIs as a primary method to distribute applications. The app model is still way better to doing that. So there are, of course, there are some limitations in here. So what are the purposes? We can do a detect only, meaning that there might be stuff that I just want to monitor. The BitLogger baseline. That is like a detect only. I just want to figure out if my colleagues' machines are actually protected or not. It's not like I'm going to remediate or fix that, because maybe it's not an easy fix. Maybe I actually need to get the laptop or something like that. But I could fix it. So if for many of the scenarios that I have today, I will go in and remediate. So I will go in and change the registry key if it's not 1 and I want it to be 1. And then something strange, we can also do a detect only and then remediate without remediating. And it sounds a little bit strange, but when you're doing a detect, you can run a script. So if you build some logic into that script, then while you're doing your detection, you can actually fix stuff or break stuff, all depending on your scripting capabilities. And then you can do a detect only and then remediate using a collection. So for instance, when you create a deployment, you can create a collection based on the results, put your devices or your users into that specific collection, and then in there you just go ahead and deploy your app or deploy your task sequence or whatever you want to do. So there are a lot of different purposes, there are a lot of different reasons why you want to do this. For those of you who have not worked with compliance management before, I'm going to walk you through it. So I'm going to start up with some what I would call a very easy use case, registry management. There is a lot of stuff that we can fix and then we want to set in registry. One of them is client remediation. Those of you who have been working with Config Manager for years, you know that in Configuration Manager, I have a feature in here called CCM Evaluation. This feature is kind of neat. I'm pretty sure that Wally mentioned it in his favorite tools. Otherwise, he will mention it in part 2, I guess. It's really cool to have running on your clients. So this one by default will run every 24 hours. You don't really know when it will run. You can control it by a registry key called CCM Eval hour, but maybe the client is not running in that point, and so on and so forth. If something is wrong, it will try and fix it. That's pretty good, because then hopefully my client will be working. But what if this is on a server? What if this is on my domain controller, for instance? I don't want this one here to go into my DC and start fixing stuff outside of my maintenance window. So on this one here, I really want to disable the feature. In order for me to do that, a few things that I need to do. I need to figure out what and where I want to configure some stuff. So if I go to HKey local machine, and you won't be able to see that So let's just zoom it on this box as well. There you go. Here you are. So if I go to HKey local machine, Microsoft CCM Eval, then I have a key down here called notify only, and notice this one here is false by default. So what this will do is it will just kick in the evaluation process. It will look in an XML file, and in there it will say, okay, if WVMI is broken, can you go in and try and fix that, and so on and so forth. So potentially it could reinstall some of the components that are being used by other applications. So I want to make sure that this one here, notify only, is configured to true. That will be something that I do for more or less all my projects. So go to compliance settings. In compliance settings, I have a folder called client health. I will explain some of these a little later. But this one here is definitely one of my client health components. So CCM Eval disable. Servers only. Those of you attending my Intune Config Manager session tomorrow, we are going to talk much more about mobile device management. You could also, if you're using Mac, create Mac settings. We can use Mac settings in here to control your wallpaper on your Mac, your security stuff, and so on and so forth. But for most of the scenarios, it would typically be a Windows setting. It can run on any platform. I do know I don't have any XP and Vista and so on, but I don't want to waste my time deselecting these. And then I'm just creating my setting. So CCM Eval. I know it's a string, and I remember the Hive. That was HKey local machine. And then I'm just going to connect to a reference machine. And on the reference machine here, browse to HKey local machine. Take a few seconds for it to connect. And then we'll play the mouse game. There you go. CCM Eval, find the value that you want to change. Notify only. Don't double click, because then it's game over. In here you'll have to do it again. So I'm creating two rules in here. I'm creating a rule saying that this one has to exist on all my client devices, and the value has to be equals true. When I click OK in here and look at my compliance rule, you will see that I have both of the rules in here. So notify must exist. That was the first one, and it has to be true. Notice down here that by default it's not enabled for remediation. I have to go in and do that. I usually do that on all my CIs if I want it to end up being remediation, and then I can control it in the deployment later on. So I'm good here. This is all I want. Close that one. And then, because I cannot deploy a CI, what I will have to do is I will go in my client health here, and then I will have a server health baseline, add in my CI, there you go. Notice down here a few things. You can add in software updates. So this is really, really cool, especially when you have some zero-day deployments you know that everybody should have. Maybe they remove them or something like that, uninstall them. This is one way, one extra way or additional way to track that. So go ahead and deploy my server baseline. I'll do that to my devices via Monster and all my servers. There you go. When I deploy this one, a few things I have to go in and select remediate. So remediation must be enabled on your deployment and also your CI. And that's not a mistake or a design error or anything like that. That's common sense, because it could be developers creating your CI, and whatever you do, don't trust a developer until you have tested out the code in your own environment. So I would usually always deploy the first one without remediation, and then go in and have a look at, okay, what actually happens in here. Do I allow a remediation outside my maintenance window? Well, this one here really depends on what you're remediating. What are the consequences? If it's only a registry key and you're flipping a value and nothing really happens, then I'm happy with that. But it could be a script that is actually triggering something, or might be even installing something else, and then you do not want to allow this outside the maintenance window. Then you can configure it to run on a schedule. And I have customers who want to run this like extremely frequent. Don't do it under 15 minutes, because that won't do you any good. So under 15 minutes, and that's like a hard-coded limit in here. It won't run every 5 minutes, for instance. Running it every like 4 hours, that's something I do for some of the baselines that I have. If I want to really, if I'm in a software update deployment project and I really want to make sure we get as compliant as quickly as possible, then I want to trace that. For something like this, I would say the default value every 7 days, that will be just fine, because no administrators will go in here and change the code back. So I'll be more than happy with that. So just deploying this one here, my server health, and what will happen here is just refresh the machine policy, and then we all know that we have to play the waiting game for a couple of minutes, and then we should see the server health in here. While we are waiting for that one, let me just show you another one that I have in here that is really neat. So this is a blog post from a Belgium colleague. I don't know if you have read this one here, but this one here plays a key role when we are doing software update deployment, because what this one will do is it will go in and control the number of seconds that we are showing the balloon tips. We all know that when we are sending out a mail or writing something on SharePoint, users, they don't read it. I mean, it's from service disk, just delete. It's like they have an automatic rule or something like that. And by default, the notifications when new software updates are popping up will only be there for like 5 seconds. So this one here works on Windows 7. We'll go in and configure your tray notify, and it's just a registry value, just like the one I showed you. And then you can go in here and say, well, for how long do you actually want your balloons to be visible? So that's just another example of a registry key in here. So hopefully that was enough talk for this one here. To come down. There you go. So I have my server health, and if you notice the compliance in here, we should only have 3 compliance messages. It should be like unknown, because we haven't yet evaluated this one. That's perfectly okay. It should be compliant or non-compliant. This one here, this is bad news. I mean, someone wrote something that is not working, or maybe there are some security issues or something like that, but we cannot evaluate this baseline. So that one we need to look into. So it's currently unknown. I'll just go ahead and evaluate this, and now it says it's compliant. So if I go back into my notify only in here and just do a refresh, you'll see that this one here is true. So what does this mean for all of us who have been doing this the traditional way? Well, the traditional way would be to create a registry script of some sort, or maybe export the reg key and then use regedit in a package and deploy that. And if you have 150 distribution points, you need to distribute that package to 150 distribution points. I mean, there is a lot of other stuff going on in that process, while this one here, it's more or less just fire and forget. Super easy. If you can identify the key, you can also remediate the key. That's plain and easy. Any questions? I mean, there are a ton of scenarios where you want to use where you want to change a registry key, but disable the CCM evaluation on your servers, that one I've been using since day one, and there is a good reason for doing that. I had 2 accidents at customers where they suddenly lost a couple of hundred servers each because the CCM evaluation process thought something was wrong, began reinstalling components, but there was nothing wrong with the components, so it kind of uninstalled the components instead. So we were left without WVMI and stuff like that on some of the servers. Not a funny afternoon. So another one, yeah.
Just want to add, it's I guess a lot of here uses group policy to edit their registry settings, and huge feature is that you can now deploy registry keys to undomain joined viewers, and also it's a nice feature that you can also report it in Registry Manager.
Absolutely. So what Marius is saying, that the demo that I just did here with the registry management, I mean, this is like a GPO, but it's unlike a GPO because I can also deploy this to my workgroup machines. I can deploy this to machines in an untrusted forest. So I do not rely on domain membership or anything like that. And I can also report on this one here. So that's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. Application tracking. I have written in here that we can track if an application is installed or not. That's kind of nice. We can, build a white list and a black list, and we can do stuff. We can already do that with Windows components. But I can also see who installed the application. So if someone installed an application, because let's face it, some of you still have local administrators. And when you have that, I mean, do you know what they're actually installing? Probably not. So we will be able to track that in here. And then I wrote disable software inventory and start using software inventory. And that's not because I was drunk when I wrote that. What I mean is, why are we running software inventory? Well, we want to get file versions. So I want to know for Dropbox, for instance, because that one is not listed in add remove programs. So I want to know if it's there or not. How can I do that? I can search for executables. But when I start a software inventory process, that one can easily take, on a laptop like this one, that is sometimes plugged into power, sometimes running on battery, can easily take like 20 hours. Because Microsoft has built in idle time when you're running software inventory in 2012. And if I only want, like one file, why did someone go in there and then do a search for all executables? So in here I can kind of cheat with a CI and say, hey, I'm searching for these 3 files, and then they give them a file version number that I know is non-existing. Because what the agent will do is it will say, okay, I didn't find Dropbox version 00008, but I found this version instead. And then it will actually report the version back. So now I have information about, okay, so where did you find the file? Okay, I found the file in here. And what version number do you have? And that's all I need. That is all I need for that specific file, because that's more or less what we want when we get a software inventory request. It's always a specific file. It's never all executables, because no one is using all executables in here. So we can use a CI for that. And let's take a look at the two different use cases in here. So the first one, let me start by showing you the result. So I have PCO1 in here. PCO1 has a local administrator, Mike, and Mike is not really listening to what we are telling the guy. So I can see that when I go in here and look at this custom entry. So I have an entry called event log app installs. Okay, this one here will tell me for all the 1033 and zeros we have in here, it will tell me who installed applications. So, and the language, I mean the exit code, so I'll get back to that. This is the language code, of course. So in here I can see that, well, Mikey installed an application. And then I can easily go in and identify the application and see that is this one here it's being recorded, so I won't use the word idiot, but the guy actually installed a super old version of Adobe Reader. And we don't want that. And that's what you're getting when you have local administrators. Let's face it, you don't know what you have. So this one here, this one works. First off, you need to have for your custom client settings in your hardware inventory. If I go into my hardware inventory in here, set classes, you need to have that custom class. So you need to create that custom class, or you need to have a file where you have that custom class. I have, see if I have it with me here, otherwise I'll make sure that this one here is available. But I will basically just go in and import my MOV file that I have. So what exactly am I importing? Well, if I look at my CIs in here, then I have something in here that it's a VB script, right? So don't tell anybody. But what this script here will do is, when I look at this, it will actually do stuff. So this script here will actually call a program when I execute it on the client. That program will go in and have a look at Event Viewer, the application log, find the information that we want, and write that into WVMI. So once I have it in there, then I can go grab my modify my hardware inventory and then just import that that hardware class. So this is I would say this is different from what we would normally use a CI for. So you can see here that we're running an application. There is no guarantee that this will work on all your machines and so on, but this has been tested in a real enterprise environment, and it worked out just fine there. So you have a discovery script, and normally in a discovery script you would just discover stuff, figuring out if it's you know, like black or white, 1 or 0, and so on and so forth. But this script here is actually doing a lot more stuff. So I ran the script. There is not much to it. So we just want to make sure that none of this is returned, not applicable or done, and that's about it. And then what I've done is I just added this script here into my baseline, and that's the only thing I have in here. So when I go and install something on the machine, and after that I execute this one, so this one is typically something I want to run on a daily basis, then the day after my hardware inventory will kick in, and then we'll just get the information in here. This is kind of cool, because how on earth would you figure out who actually installed applications? and we don't have the info in here normally. So this is one of them that I told you about for a software inventory. Then I also said stop using software inventory and start using software inventory instead. So what I have in here is I have another script, and this script here, it's actually not even a script. What this will do is it will just search for a file. So do you have this file in here? If you have this file, is that file actually version 00001? What will config manager reply when it searches for the file? It finds the file, but it's not the right version. What config manager will say is, if I go into my monitoring node and find my deployments, I should have a deployment called software. Let's look at the status in here. So I have some non-compliant devices, and I'm non-compliant. And why am I non-compliant? Because this is the actual value. What does this mean? It means that I was told by someone in my organization that we need to figure out how many different versions of Dropbox do we have. Normally, what I would do is I would go in and enable. Oops, let's just cancel that one there. I would normally go in and enable software inventory because that is what we have been told. But software inventory, in my opinion, is kind of evil because it takes so long time for each of my machines to actually process that. It's not like the machines will ever see that. I mean, it's not like the users are going to complain about performance or anything, but it just takes so long time to process it. And what and what we often see is, I mean, you have administrators just like here, adding in all executables, all OCX files and stuff like that, and then suddenly you just have a bunch of information in here that you don't need. And remember, those of you who attended my session this morning here, when we talk about performance, I mean, if you don't need to have all of the information in your SQL database, don't collect that. So right now, I have the information in my database. I just need to dig them out somehow, but I do have them because I can actually see them in here. I'll show you how we can get them out just a little bit. Have any of you used CIs to deploy or in inventory software? A couple of you? Yeah, kind of the same. Yeah. So scripting, what can we do with scripting? Well, we can do it. We can do anything more or less. We can replace group policies because, I mean, let's face it, whatever you can do in a GPO, you will also be able to do in here. You can install printers if you want to do that. How do we traditionally install printers? Well, we have a GPO, or some might have a script or something like that. It really depends on the organization. One of my favorite calls from last year was a support case that took like 3-4 hours until we realized what the guy was actually trying to do. He was just trying to figure out if a printer was installed, and if it wasn't installed, then just go ahead and install it. The way he did that, he had a logon script. So the logon script would create a folder and copy down some files, some VBS files to each of the user's desktops. And then he would have a package in Configuration Manager executing that VB file. And that was what he couldn't do, so that was why he kind of got in contact with me. So that's like a lot of moving parts in there. If we look at how that one can be solved, then that's more or less super easy. So I have a CI here called a color printer. And if I look at my settings here, you'll notice that this time I have a discovery script, and I also have a remediation script. So the first thing I want to do is I want to figure out if the printer is actually installed. So do you have the CT color printer 01? Do you have it or not? Because if you don't have it, how big is the effort to install a printer using PowerShell? Here you go. So he solved that by having a startup script, or a logon script, sorry, and then he had a VB script in that he wanted to execute locally. But the thing is, even though that worked at the end, it only ran the package once. It's not really checking for that over and over and over again. So this is just a another example of what I would call thinking out of the box. Some of the other things that we want to do is we want to enable and disable Windows settings, like WinRM. If you're using Roger Sander's client center, I don't know if any of you are using that. That's typically one of the must-have config manager components. In order for us to use that, we need to enable WinRM. So you can do that. I have a CI that will do that. Dealing with shortcuts, that's another one. We want to make sure that whenever I log into my desktop, I do have these 3 or 4 shortcuts enabled, and if I don't, can you please go in and create them? That's normally part of my image. So when I'm creating my task sequence and I deploy that, I would normally try and finalize the desktop there. But it's not like if something is wrong, or if someone from the organization comes and say, hey, we need a shortcut, it's not like I'm going to change my task sequence. I mean, it doesn't work that way. We have a release process, so we might change the task sequence, like once a month or every second month. We don't change it on a daily basis just because we can. So that one, if I look at that example, you'll see here I have a shortcut check. And this again is a script. So I have a script in here. When I edit the script, you'll notice I have a remediation script as well. Do you have Notepad, the single most important application in our organization? Do you have that or not? If you do not have that, can you please go in and create that one? So this is a PowerShell script that will look for a shortcut. If you don't have it, please go in and change that. See if this one here is working. So I'll go into my clients, get my config manager, look at my configurations. Somewhere in here, I should have my software shortcuts. So this one here, let's try and evaluate that one. It will probably fail. So when I look at it, it has an error. If I start looking into my log files, those log files, my DCM and CI agent log files, will tell me stuff like, sorry, we cannot run that. And you go like, why can't I run that? Let's see here. Can't run it because Internet Explorer is not responding. So this is where you start dancing. So what it will tell me down here is that it will tell me, sorry, your execution policy in PowerShell do not allow you to run this one here. And the same second you see those words, you go like, my execution policy do not allow me. And then you know exactly what's wrong. So you can see here, you have the error code. Let's face it, it doesn't tell us anything, just a bunch of numbers. But you can see here it says, well, your script is not signed. Cool. We will figure out, we'll take a look in a couple of minutes and see where the script is actually being executed from. But it is being executed from a local source. So when the script is not signed, what we can do is we can go back to our administrators, the AD guys, and say, hey, can you please go in and change the execution policy? They will look at you like you're an idiot and say, nope. And then again, we don't have to ask for permissions. So I'll just go into my computer agent in here. And in here I will say, well, my PowerShell execution policy. Let's go ahead and bypass that one. What does this mean? It means that the scripts we're executing through the agent will have this setting here. Okay, so it's not like Mike or whoever is now a local administrator on this box can go in and execute PowerShell scripts. They still have to follow the rules we have in Active Directory. So I'll enable this one, and then I will talk for 15 seconds. That's about the time it takes for my policy to be generated and so on and so forth. And once that has taken place, I'll go into my actions, and then I will request a machine policy. So let's just go ahead and run that. It will take a few seconds to download the policy, evaluate the policy. You all know that. You have been working with Config Manager for many years. And you also know it doesn't work the first time. So let's just go ahead and evaluate this. Still errors out. Just means that the policy hasn't been applied yet. No big deal. In progress, compliance, and I don't know if you noticed, but now I have access to Notepad and everybody in the organization is happy. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we really should only have 3 messages in here. I mean, compliance states, they should be non-compliant, compliant, or unknown. An error means something was wrong. And an error is typically, if you're running PowerShell scripts, that is typically your PowerShell permissions. Yep. Any questions so far? Nope. WVMI, or VMI as we call it. Windows Management Instrumentation has been has been around for a long time. It is still one of the only ways we can really control the client. So knowing a little about WVMI in here is good to know, because there are some use cases that everybody wants and that we cannot understand, are not already in the custom client settings or the default client settings. So you need to know a little about the tools that are out there. So you have some object browsers, you have Scriptomatic. We at Cortec, we developed our own tool. And the only reason for doing that was because the tool we were using was not free. We thought it was, and then we read the end user license agreement. So that costed us a lot of hours. So one good advice from me is never read the end user license agreement, because you just realize you cannot use the tool. A few namespaces. On the server side, it's the SMS side and then the site code. But on the client, it would be root CCM. And you should not, just like the SQL database, you shouldn't be afraid to go in here, because after all, what can you break? So a few things in here. The client cache. I've been working with some schools back in Denmark, and it's always like that some of the student PCs, they need to have like a 20 gigabyte cache size. How do we give them a 20 gigabyte cache size? Well, we can do that when we're installing the client. After that, we can create some custom scripts and so on, or we can use the right-click tools. But I want to ensure that they always have a 20 gigabyte cache size. Software update compliance, that's another one. We store software update information or reboot information in 3 different places. So if Config Manager, the agent, requested an update, that information is stored in WVMI. When you install the software update, you will actually, not you, but the Windows Update agent will create registry keys. So you also need to know about them. And then also, if you install or the end user install anything, then the file rename, pending operation stuff that you might know about, that is stored in a 3rd registry key. So you also need to know about that. So to have the entire, am I compliant or not, is a reboot pending, you need to search for 3 different places. So let's have a look at that one. So the first I really want to see is if I go in and use our WVMI browser. The WVMI browser in here is a free tool. You can just download it from our website. So we'll go into CCM, and in here I have Software Management Agent. Just going to connect to that namespace. So it will take a few seconds for it to load all the different classes. And then I have my cache. And when I look at my cache, the only thing I do in here is I just search for cache. And then I double click the cache config because I know that is the class that I want to have a look at. On the query tab, we created a query for you. See, that's service, right? Right there, that's good service. So select everything from cache config, executing that, and it will give me valuable information. Like first off, now I know it's the cache config class, I know where it's located. I also know what it is I want to change, that is the size. So right now the size on this specific box here is 8 gigabytes. Having all of that information, if I go into PowerShell, see if I have that right there. Here you can see I'm doing exactly the same. So here I'm just doing a get WVMI object. I'm looking in the same namespace. I'm selecting size from cache config, and I want to have a look at the size. So if I execute this one here, it will tell me, well, currently the size is 8 gigabytes. So now I know how to query the information. The next thing I need to know is how do I actually change that? Well, I can change that by putting in another size and restart the service. And that's what I'm doing in here. So I'm changing the size to 6 gigabytes, and then I put that in, restart the service. After that is done, it will be 6 gigabytes. So taking that knowledge that I've just learned in here about the information we have in WVMI, I can go back into my CI in here. I have a CI called Client Cache. And this one here again, notice this one has a discovery script and a remediation script. So the first discovery script, there is absolutely no difference in what I have in here compared to what I just showed you in PowerShell. It's exactly the same script. So what is it that I want to search for? I want to find the size. Cool. When are you compliant? I'm compliant when the size is 10 gigabytes. So change this value in here to 10. Perfect. And if I just edit this one here, nope, sorry. If I go back in here and edit my remediation script, of course I also have to change this one in here. Otherwise it will just loop endlessly, which could be fun on some machines. So this one here is taking the same 3 lines that I have had in the other script. The only thing I do not do is I don't restart the service. I don't restart the service because, let's face it, what will happen when you do that? I mean, when you're running something, you're waiting for a status message to inform the management point what happened. If you restart the service, I mean, probably won't report correctly back. So I'm not doing that. So I do know that I changed it to 10 gigabytes, and we are not going to wait for the policy to kick in. But right now, my cache size, if I configure that one, it is 8 gigabytes. And if I go into my configurations in here, do I have my cache in here? Yep, I have a cache for developers. So if I evaluate this one here, it now says that it's compliant. So that is the one that actually changed the cache size. Going back in here, remember I haven't restarted the service or anything like that. So it will have to wait for me to restart the SMS agent host before the change actually kicks in. That's perfectly okay. I can live with that. Some other examples that I have in here, and we will have to use Zoom it. So if I look at all my software reboot, because software reboot is really a key issue when I go to customers. So the first one here, where I invoke a WVMI method, this one goes into the client SDK namespace, and then it will just figure out if config manager requested a reboot. So when I execute this one here, let's just execute this one here again. You'll see down here if a reboot is actually pending. And I can see that a reboot is pending right now. So this one here wouldn't be compliant. It would tell me that a reboot is pending. Once I figure that out, I can I'm not going to reboot. We could do that. Let's face it, we could be extremely evil in here and have a remediation script doing something. We're not going to do that. Okay, so what I would normally do instead is I would place this machine here in a specific collection because it's non-compliant. And then what I would do is I would run a script or a package like the one I have in here, the shutdown tool. So this is the tool that I will, it's still counting in the background when I zoom up. So let's just postpone this for 10 minutes. So this tool here, what this tool will do is it will just look in WVMI and see when was the last time you actually restarted. And we can configure, well, if you restarted more than 7 days ago, let's display the tool. And when we display the tool, the end user will know, you know what, you're not compliant. We can put in any logo, we can put in any text in here. This is my text, it's probably not a good example. And you can also put in the heading, and you can control the buttons and whatever have you. So it's just about that one. So I want to figure out if I'm compliant or not. And I also want to figure out if I have a file rename pending in here. So this one will just search for your registry key, and when you go into current control set control session manager and look at your pending file rename operations key, if that one has any values at all, it will return true. So when this one here returns false, I'm happy. Okay, that one here is not causing a reboot. That's perfectly okay. And then the last one that I want to include in here, that's this one here. So that's fine. Did I do anything wrong? There you go. So this one here will go in and query the software update key. And if there are any values in that one, then it's the config manager client. That one was true, so I know config manager has done something to put this one in a reboot pending mode, and I know now that it's actually a software update because this one here also returns true. So the only thing you have to do is just go into registry, and if you have anything in this key here, it is software update that is causing the reboot pending. Why is that at all important? Well, it's important if we go back to the first thing that I showed you. When I look at my software updates in here, you can see I'm 0% compliant. And for those of you who are working with software update, you know 0% might not be your target. It's actually really bad. So why am I not 100% compliant? Well, some of it could be caused by the fact that you're all in the reboot pending mode. So now I use my baseline to actually answer some of all of these questions in here, which is kind of cool. I still have 4 more minutes. So on the client side, what happens when you're running anything, the state messages and so on and so forth. I already showed you the reports. I also talked about the different states, compliant and failed and error and so on. But if I look at one of the settings that I have in here, I have a configuration in here, and this one here is basically just called a long running script. That is what it is. It is a script that takes a long time to run. Why do I have that? I have that because I want to see where we are actually downloading the files to. So when you're downloading, running a PowerShell script, you're actually downloading it to the CCM system temp folder. So when I execute this one here, long running script, evaluate that one, there you can see now I have my PowerShell script. So this one here is absolutely nothing fancy. It will just have a wait. So you can just see here, we'll just start to sleep and then say hello world like any other good script should say. And then it will just disappear after it has been executed. So we have in system temp, this is where we are downloading the scripts. Could be useful information if you want to troubleshoot something. Other things that we have in here, and this one will disappear after the wait is over. Other things we have, if you go in and install the resource kit tool, when you look at your client tools, you have this fellow here, send schedule messages XML. This one can be kind of nice when you want to troubleshoot something. So if I go into my client tools in here, you'll see that I can run send schedule /L and then say, hey, I want to pipe everything out to my baseline 1 txt file. So what it's doing right now is it's just checking, reading all the baselines that I have deployed to this box here, and then it's piping everything out to a text file. That can be useful when I'm troubleshooting. It can also be useful if I want to remote into something and execute something remote. That is my phone telling me that I have 120 seconds left. So if I look right now in my C drive, here you see I have my base, and it will then list all the different stuff that I can invoke. And down here it will also list all the different baselines that I have. So the different baselines here, there is a scope ID. So if I want to execute something remotely, and why would I want to do that? Maybe I want to create my own right-click tools or what have you. Then what I do is I just do a send schedule in here. Oops, let's see where we have that. I send a schedule like that, and then I just have the scope ID right after. So when I'm running this one here, it will just execute that one. So again, if I just execute it here, it will just execute that specific baseline. So again, I am running my very long script. So I should have the file in here if that is the baseline. There you go. I just got the script in there. See, Wally ran 30 seconds late, so I can do the same. I just want to show you one more thing and then I'm done. So remember the Dropbox that I had? In here I can go in and execute my query. Just probably have to be in the right database. And it will tell me exactly. So from the display name I had called use CI like software inventory, these are the files that we have actually gathered information about. And I can see that I should probably just do something like this. Oops. Nope. Select distinct and then execute it again because I had a couple of double entries in there. So this is how I can turn my CIs into a software report. And then this one here I can just go in and create a report, which would be kind of nice. With that, this is the end. Thank you. So the key takeaway, I know I said this is the end, but the key takeaway is really this one here. Think out of the box. So that was my sole intent of this session, to show you like 5-7 different ways of using a CI. enough said. Enjoy the break and the rest of the conference.